All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Starting out solo today, I've got a lot of fun topics for you guys, and overall, we've got an amazing show for you guys. Space Force is back. We'll talk about that a little bit. Is the Attorney General going to be arrested by Nancy Pelosi? That's also in the program. Lots and lots of fun topics, and of course, disastrous topics. It is the news after all, especially in the Trump era. So, but before we do any of that, I've got two things for you guys. One is an important announcement that I'm going to do in a sec, and another is I'm going to address Nate Silver and his critique, if you will, of the Young Turks. I will be critiquing right back, so that'll be fun for everybody involved. And I've got receipts. Unlike Nate, as usual, I am right. Shots fired already. Okay. So here comes the big announcement. I will be holding a rally in Des Moines, Iowa on June 8th. Raised eyebrows. Okay, is it about the presidential race? Yes. Am I gonna tell you what else it's about? Not yet. And here's what you need to know, a couple of things. One is, it's about you and how you can make a big impact on this race. Now, a lot of people say that, it's like a cliched thing to say, oh my God, we're gonna involve you guys. Actually, I don't even know if a lot of people say that. So I don't know that a lot of people bother to say that, but we say it and we mean it. So this plan is centered around you, and yes, it will definitely affect the presidential race, and it is bold and it is audacious. So I need you to come to Des Moines on June 8th, wherever you are. So if you're in Iowa, yes, we'd love to have you there. If you're anywhere near there, and I looked on a map, there are a lot of things near there. So drive on in, if you can fly in, I'm not playing. This is a giant announcement. So tyt.com/rally, that is where you can enter your information so we can send you emails about the exact venue, the time, etc., and we will announce those between now and June 8th. So, but I've got to see you there. If you're not there, none of this is going to work. If you are there, we can change the world. And I don't think it's hyperbole at all. I remember a scene from Knock Down the House, the movie about AOC and the other Just Democrats. And a longtime civil rights activist is in the room when they're first starting out, and they're young candidates. A lot of them have never run for office before. And he looks around the room and he says, someone in this room is going to change the world. And he was right. So someone in that room on June 8th is also going to change the world. So tyt.com/rally, I need our army there. That is an army of democracy, an army of truth, the TYT army. So come join me, and we together will embark on an adventure that just might change America. All right, that's fun for everybody. All right, now let's go on to Nate Silver. So Nate Silver attacked us the other day. Why? That's fun, okay. And he actually was a little over the top, to say the least. I'm not at all offended by it, other people might be. In fact, I'm fairly amused by it. It was like he was trying to thump us or something, like I'll show the bully or, all right, we'll find out who the bully is. We'll find out who's right, but he was full of vigor, let's put it that way. Okay, here, I'm gonna let you judge for yourself. So he talked about it on his podcast. Not only that, he later tweeted it, like the quote you're about to hear. So he wasn't playing, he wanted to get our attention. Here's what he said.
Let's start with the basics. Nate, what does it mean when you see N/A among a particular demographic group in a poll's crosstabs?
Well, to start with the basics, I mean, the Young Turks are full of shit about this. And I hope that people see that and then they're curious about why.
Ooh, Nate, are you in my grill? Okay. Ben Mankiewicz, who I started the show with once, said to Anna, actually, who was trying to beat me in a race, and she started out fast, and she said, I was trying to intimidate him in the beginning. And Ben said, you're trying to intimidate the intimidator? Good luck, Nate. Okay, so now let's get to the substance of this. So we covered a CNN poll on the show just last week, and John gave the background. I'm gonna show you exactly what he said to show you that we are right and Nate is wrong. And there was different categories, age groups, which is very normal in a poll. And there was a representative sample in the older demographics, and the older demographics generally like Joe Biden. The younger demographics, they did not have a representative sample, but they do actually use a multiplier on that. And so Nate explained that in his podcast. I'll come back to it in a second. But it said NA is not applicable. We explained that to our audience. That apparently is what set Nate and his colleagues off, because they thought we did not do a good job of explaining that. Again, in a second, I'm going to show you the video so you'll have absolute proof that they are wrong. But first, more chest thumping from Nate Silver.
If you're implying to your audience that you're expert in these areas and you're just wrong about stuff, then people's willingness to be wrong in cases where it's really relatively easy to determine kind of objectively, quote unquote, what's right and wrong, versus like this next segment that we'll have where I'm sure half the audience will disagree with my view on impeachment, whatever else. That's a lot more complicated. But like polls are relatively simple facts. And like the fact that people get those wrong ought to worry you about kind of how much people are concerned about kind of actually getting the story right.
I love that. Thank you for that setup. So if you get things that are simple facts about polling, well, it does show you and maybe give you concern about what their real bias is, what their real concerns are. And especially if you're an expert on a topic, like Nate is an expert on polling. That's why we had this conversation. And so, by the way, as you'll see in a minute, do I dislike Nate Silver? No, not at all. I actually think he's significantly better than the rest, but we'll give you that context in a second. But he wasn't done yet, and I've got to show you this because this is where he explains why we got it wrong. So I want you to pay real close attention to what he says we got wrong, because then I'm going to show you what we actually said. Let's watch.
If I were CNN, I'd probably say, you know what, because people make even more idiotic statements if you list NA and don't understand the poll at all. And some people literally think that CNN just didn't even bother to poll anyone under the age of 50. I probably list the estimates for young voters with all the noise attached.
So, you've got the over the top statements again, idiotic. Earlier he said full of crap. He said we're just wrong. But if you notice, the substance of the attack was there. He said when people say that the poll did not count people under the age of 50 at all. Now let's go to the tape that he is referring to, the segment he's referring to, and Nate is so biased. They actually played this clip on their own podcast, and then he's like, he didn't hear what he didn't want to hear. So listen to what John Iadarola says in the setup, and listen to whether he says they did actually count people under the age of 50. Watch.
What you will notice immediately is that as you go down, that's a whole bunch of different candidates. There's a lot of NAs, and the NAs are in the categories of people between 18 to 34 and 35 to 49. Now, a lot of people notice that relatively quickly. Now, that does not mean that they did not have any respondents in those age ranges. They did. It just means that there weren't enough for them to consider it to be a sort of representative sample for opinions held by those people. There's just not enough of them. And overall, it means that the results overall are going to be a good bit biased, because what you are really polling in actuality are not people, it's the oldest age groups in America. And is it a shock that they might prefer Joe Biden over some of the other candidates? And again, it doesn't mean by itself that he did not experience some sort of bump, or that bump might not be sustainable, or they might not find in other places. But the headlines never said Joe Biden gets big bump from poll of septuagenarians. It says Joe Biden up big. Pack this thing in, it's done.
So John gave several important caveats there, but the most important one is the one that Nate was addressing. He said, it's not like they didn't count young people, they did. You saw it with your own eyes. John just said that in the clip. Nate listens to that, says, I don't like the Young Turks, generally don't like progressives much. So I'm gonna ignore that he said that, and I'm going to not only pretend that he didn't say it, I'm gonna go on a whole 15-minute rant on my podcast, and then I'm going to tweet that the Young Turks are full of crap, because I don't like them. So that's the reality of Nate's bias. So here, then on Twitter, I said last night, we'll be addressing Nate's smear of us on tomorrow's show. Great irony in claiming we didn't explain a poll correctly, not true, as you just saw with your own eyes, and then not correctly explaining what we said. Nate, when are you going to admit your establishment bias? I'm gonna get back to that in a second. Then of course, Kyle jumps in. Kyle Kulinski's host of Secular Talk. It's a giant show on YouTube and other platforms. You should check it out, and it is part of the TYT network. And he's a little brasher than I am, believe it or not. And he says, "Hi, data boy," and then referring to Nate. And then you can't see the full tweet there, but the headlines are all about how Nate Silver got the Trump wrong during the Republican nomination. And so Nate was, of course, upset about that. Now, he's acknowledged that in the past, but it still gets under his skin. And he tweeted this in response. He said, predictions are one thing. We've been doing this for a long time, and the track record shows we got things right more often than not, by the way, which is true, which is not to say always, but facts are another. And you all ought to stop misinforming readers about basic facts about polls. Nate, given what we just showed you, right back at you, brother. And then finally, on this note, I wanted to say, look, and I listened to the rest of Nate's podcast, if they had come back with a critique that was justified and factual, I would have said, oh, that's interesting, and that's an interesting point. Like if they had said, no, the Young Turks didn't say anything wrong, but I wish they would have added that, yes, they do count young people in that poll, just like John said, but there's also a weighting system which makes sure that even though they're not a representative sample, that they at least try to get it to catch up to the other demographic groups which are properly represented. That would have been an interesting critique of not what we said, but what we didn't say. Okay, that would have been fair, but that's not what he said, because again, he doesn't like being wrong, and he has been wrong. And so, in fact, did we even say, like, you heard John say there's other polls? I went on to emphasize that more later in the clip. I don't know if you watched the whole clip, but if you're gonna go out and tell the whole world that somebody's full of crap, I think you do have an obligation not to watch. I'm not pulling a Sam Harris. You have to watch every video we've ever done in our lives. Otherwise, you're taking us out of context, but at least finish that video and see if we gave further context. So in reality, here's what I said later in that same segment, watch. There are other polls, like the poll that we pointed out, the CNN one, it's got a massive issue, as you can tell. But Biden is picking up steam, that makes sense. He just announced, and he actually did a good political strategy with pointing out Charlottesville, Trump attacked them. That's gonna lift up his numbers. You can talk about that and do it in a fair way. I thought Warren's policy proposals would do well. I've been telling you for about a week on the show, if not more, that her numbers would start to go up, and they have. And that's also shown in the same polls. And she's gone up about 3 points, and now she's solidly in third place. So that's real, and they do mention that as well. And look, so I like Elizabeth Warren a lot. I like Bernie Sanders a lot. I told you if I like someone, I tell you, there it is, right? And Bernie Sanders, for a while looked like he was gonna overtake Biden, and I thought that made sense, politically, let alone what I think about his policy. Now, he's not in as commanding a second place as I would have thought, and I point that out. And it's two different hats. One is, who do you think is right on the policy? And the other is, what's actually happening? What's the reality on the ground? We thought Trump might win. We couldn't stand Trump, but we gave you the actual numbers and talked about likely versus not. So it is, I have to confess, it is frustrating where we say we're home of progressives, we clearly label who we are, we talk honestly about our point of view, and then we actually analyze the numbers because it's our job to give you facts, and they call us biased. Then they turn around and have an actual bias where they put the numbers in a skewed perspective to favor their own candidates, and then when you point it out, they get all hurt and emotional over it. Now remember, I said that before Nate Silver got all hurt and emotional over it, and then he went on to fulfill that prophecy nearly perfectly. So thank you, Nate, I appreciate it. So the reason sometimes progressives get agitated is because the establishment is constantly demeaning towards progressives, dismissive of people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and their supporters. And when we point out facts, they get really agitated. And we're not doing it based on who we like and don't like. So for example, when we show you Bernie Sanders did better with independents than Hillary Clinton in 2016, we didn't say that because we made up the numbers. Those were real polls. But every pundit on television, who all of them are worse than Nate, but would go on and say, no, my gut says independents would like a really corporate candidate like Hillary Clinton. Based on what, right? No, the polling indicates independents like Bernie Sanders, but even Nate, on issues, especially when it came to Trump, but oftentimes when it comes to Bernie Sanders, ignores numbers that he doesn't like. Or more accurately, that bother him, that don't fit his narrative. And I don't think that Nate even realizes he has a narrative. He thinks, what? No, I'm just for as Jay Rosen, a great media critic from NYU says, the view from nowhere. I'm the objective guy. That, you know what that does? That privileges his point of view as the correct perspective. And that's just not true. You have a perspective, and it is not necessarily the correct one. And it is so easy and lazy to say, well, the conservatives are obviously biased and the progressives are obviously biased, and they're both obviously wrong. Whereas, hey, lucky me, my perspective, the establishment one, the one that is in favor of the status quo and believes the status quo, is the correct one. No, it is not. And facts have shown it otherwise, especially in the case of Trump. So he says that we do it based on our bias and that we just do prognostication. I'm gonna show you a clip here from 2016 when I criticized Nate for the first time. And you'll notice, again, it's tempered and it's about the facts. And it's about Donald Trump, who I am not biased in favor of. The exact opposite. I loathe him. I think he is deeply incompetent, one of the dumbest guys alive, enormously malicious. I don't know that there is a critic of Donald Trump in the country more than I am, or harsher against Donald Trump than I am, okay? But nonetheless, I saw the numbers, because while we're honest about our perspective, we have to give you reality in terms of the facts. So now watch this clip from 2016. Keep in mind these things. Nate Silver, all the way in November of 2015, had Donald Trump's chance of winning winning the Republican nomination at 6%, when all the polling indicated he had a significant lead. Now, in October of that same year, a month before Nate had it at 6%, I said Donald Trump would win the Republican nomination. Well, let me show you the clip from later on in the process. Now, this is during the general election, but many months before election day, and I explained the whole context of it back then. Here, watch. Nate Silver, until this election cycle, had been known as a fairly excellent prognosticator. One of the guys who would say that is me. And I defended him throughout the 2012 election. Idiots like Joe Scarborough would go on the air and go, oh, Nate Silver's polling is incorrect. My gut says the American people will pick Mitt Romney. Your gut isn't worth squat. It isn't worth the squat in it. Nate Silver had numbers. Unfortunately, in this election cycle, Nate's lost track of the numbers and he can't see past his own bias. So he gave Trump a 2% chance of nomination, was spectacularly wrong. Here they say, but Silver pointed out that Trump's general election numbers have still remained consistent, whereas primary voting numbers have not. Now, he says, oh, in the primary, it was hard to predict because he's going up and down. Actually, he was fairly consistently number one. That's why back in June of 2015, I said he was definitely going to be in the top three. And then by October of 2015, months before any of the voting, I bet that he would win the nomination. Now, what did I base that on? My gut? No, I'm not an idiot like a TV pundit. Funny enough, I based it on the polls. And I also based it on how he was campaigning and the mood of the country. Now you say in the general election, though, totally consistent numbers. Really? Let me show you the polling. Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. That's Real Clear Politics average of polls. Does that look consistent to you? Now forget the left side of that. That's in the primaries, that they're not head to head, etc. But look, starting around April, right? What the hell is consistent about those numbers? Hillary Clinton's got a big lead. Donald Trump dips, then he rises, and then he rises more, and then he passes her, and then he dips again. What part of that is consistent enough for Nate Silver to say that? No, that's it. Well, let's wrap this election up. Hillary Clinton has an 80% chance to win. Wrong again, Nate. And that did prove to be wrong. But again, I want to give context here. Nate was better off than the New York Times, Huffington Post, and almost every other outlet on election day. The only people who were saying that Trump had a better chance of winning than Nate Silver, as far as I could tell, on the national scene was us. And that is why, and there's plenty of famous videos about that floating around on the internet with lots of views, where Ben and I say brace for impact. And because Trump can really win this thing. But I remember Huffington Post had Hillary Clinton's chance of winning at 98.4%. And Nate said, no, that's not true. His chances are higher, but not that high. And so he's a little off there or significantly off, but better than the rest. And that's really important. I've got a cough here. But I want to, again, clarify the difference between right-wing critics, MSM critics of Nate Silver and us. The right wing doesn't care about facts at all. So they look at numbers and science, go, science, no, my God. Other words, Donald Trump doesn't believe in numbers. Okay, I mean, how do you have a conversation with people who don't speak the same language? So, by the way, don't just learn English, learn math. So then you got the mainstream media who says, oh, Nate's a nerd and he's just focusing on numbers. And no, my gut says, I went to a cocktail party and all my millionaire friends said tax cuts for the rich is really unpopular. The country's really center right and they don't like tax. Or you could look at a poll and it says 76% of the country wants tax increases for the rich. But everybody on TV is rich, so they don't look at that poll. Instead, they tell you the exact opposite of what's true, alternative facts. So their critique of Nate is easy to dismiss. Our critique, I think, is less easy to dismiss, and that is maybe part of the reason why he's agitated. And do I know Nate Silver's politics? Do I know who he's gonna vote for? No. I have some clues in the podcast. Every one of them referred to progressives as they, and with a little dismissive tone in their voice, like, I mean, that's what they believe. Those people on the left, they would do false equivocation and say things like they're like the people on the right. Really? We have lunatics on the right wing who don't even believe in climate change. They believe 99% of the world's scientists got together and created a conspiracy. I mean, you should be locked up in an insane asylum if you believe that. Whereas we say, hey, perhaps you have a bias maybe you're not even aware of. And he's like, oh my God, you're full of crap. You're just like Trump. Oh, come on. You see, you are betraying your own bias there. So what is his bias? Well, partly it's things that are somewhat understandable if he would ever open up and listen. He looks at the history of polling, but times are different. And so he has a thesis that the party usually picks the winner. Well, that is true if you look at the past, but that was before a populist wave came in, not just in America, but all across the world. So I thought Corbyn would do way better. Even, in fact, I said I thought he would win. That was an audacious comment when he was down 24 points in the UK with 6 weeks left to go. As it turns out, he didn't win, and we acknowledge when we don't get it right, but he did close the lead by about 20 points in 6 weeks, which was stunning. And why? If you just looked at the polling ahead of Corbyn's election, you would have said, hey, the UK just voted for Brexit, which is right wing. So of course they'll never go for Corbyn. That misunderstands the current political dynamic all across the world. It isn't left versus right, it's populist versus establishment. But Nate has not caught up to that, and almost no one in the mainstream media has caught up to that. So they look at it and go, well, obviously the guys who won before, the guys with the polished suits and the nice haircut and all the consultants, and the ones that the party favors and the establishment favors are the ones more likely to win. And that is why he got Trump wrong too, and he admits it, so, and to his credit. He wrote an article later after all this. He said, how I acted like a pundit and screwed up on Donald Trump. And he gave details. He said, unlike virtually every other forecast we publish at 538, including the primary and caucus projections I just mentioned, our early estimates of Trump's chances weren't based on a statistical model. Instead, they were what we subjective odds, which is to say, educated guesses. But Nate, that's exactly what we were telling you. But you were so hurt by that that you lash out against us. I believe, and obviously I could be biased too, but the only ones giving you a legitimate critique that you might actually, learn from. And I don't want it to sound arrogant because he's still making the same mistakes. I'll give you one last quote, part of his mea culpa. And you have to give him credit for the mea culpa. People on TV never bother apologizing when they get it wrong, and they get it wrong 9 out of 10 times. So he said, in other words, we were basically acting like pundits, but attaching numbers to our estimates. And we succumbed to some of the same biases that pundits often suffer, such as not changing our minds quickly enough in the face of new evidence. See, Nate, that's what we're asking you to do now. Without a model as a fortification, we found ourselves rambling around the countryside like all other pundit barbarians, randomly setting fire to things. So that's right. But Nate, you're still not past it. And in fact, even in that same analysis, he talked about Trump is a one-off. Why does he think that? Because everybody in Washington thinks that. Everybody in New York thinks that. Oh, no, we're gonna get back to normal. Oh, Biden's gonna come in, or Kamala Harris or someone. This is just an aberration. We don't see it in any of the rest of the historical numbers for the last 20 years, etc. Yeah, that's why if you were right about them, then Martin O'Malley would have given Hillary Clinton a run for her money instead of Bernie Sanders. Open your eyes. The country is in a populist mood, both on the right and the left, and progressives are deeply, deeply popular. And look at your own polling when you go policy by policy. Medicare for all, 70%. Social Security protecting it is at 84%. Raising tax on the rich is 76%. I can give you literally dozens of polls where the country is not center left, it's massively left. But even Nate Silver, who should know better, and that's why I criticize him in this context, because we need you to get the numbers right. You're not supposed to be like the other guys. Looks at the numbers and says, I don't believe my lying eyes. So these people on the left are fringe, radical, extreme, etc. I don't want to ascribe those exact words from him to Bernie Sanders, but you could feel that disdain in his writing, but more importantly in his analysis. And if he doesn't get it straightened out, he'll get this election wrong too. And then he'll have to write another mea culpa and go, well, I mean, nobody could have seen Bernie Sanders coming. I mean, that's impossible. Who would know? I did a video in 2013 saying Bernie Sanders could beat Hillary Clinton. Why? Because I really love Bernie Sanders? No, because I'm telling you now, based on both the polling, which I can see with a clear eye, and yes, other factors such as the feedback we're getting from the audience, and I know that that's skewed, of course, right? But you get a sense that people are angry. They're angry about wages. And so we predicted those things many years ago, because it's not that we're any smarter than anyone else. It's just that we actually care to listen to people who are telling us those things, whether they're on the right, left, or middle. And so again, populism will rise. And if you counter with an establishment candidate, you'll be making the same exact mistake you made in 2016. And so repeating that mistake is exactly what the mainstream media is doing, saying, oh yeah, no. You see, that's Hillary Clinton lost. Why? Because she was an establishment. No, because of Bernie Sanders. What? Bernie Sanders had a 12-point lead on election day in 2016. Now, could that have been whittled down because they would have run ads against them? Of course. They always treat progressives as children. No, we're arguably more sophisticated than you. But what I do know is they would have had to whittle down a 12-point lead. It would have been incredibly difficult. We know Hillary Clinton lost. Bernie Sanders would have had a significantly better chance of winning. And the same is true today. If you run Biden, that's the same as running Hillary, and you're gonna make that same mistake. Now, I'm not ascribing those views to Nate Silver, but when he looks at it from the perspective that he does, unfortunately, I think that it encourages and buttresses the mainstream media into going, oh yeah, that's right, of course. America doesn't want a progressive, America's a center-right country. That's why Biden reaching out to Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney is a great idea. No, it is not a great idea. And as you will see in this primary season, it will prove to be a very, very bad idea. And Joe Biden will fade because that is not where the Democratic Party is. It's also not where the country is. Last thing is, I've asked Nate Silver to come on the show. I hope that he comes on and we have a good conversation about it. That's up to him if he wants to have an honest conversation about it. But this is the reality, and this was a real critique. And we weren't the ones who made up facts. Unfortunately, on his podcast, he was the one that made up facts about us. So who's the biased one, Nate? Okay, we're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, Anna's back, and we get back into domestic and international politics. Does Trump really want to go to war with Iran? Twist in that story, a good twist. We'll tell you when we come back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Lots of fun comments. Members' comments first, as always. tyt.com/join to become a member. Nell says, LOL, is Nate Silver the one who everyone acts like he's right, yet he's almost always wrong when TYT is right? Okay, well, no, that's a member of ours, but thank you, Nell, I appreciate it. Miss Kelly says that NAs, the not applicables, are statistically insignificant. John is clear and so cute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you get YouTube membership on the Young Turks channel, you can get a John Iderola emoji. So Think about it.
How are you sweating right now? How? It's so cold in the studio.
Way
He's
too hot.
really sweating. I can't
It's too
believe
hot.
it.
Okay. So first of all, let's acknowledge I'm Middle Eastern. That's also a fact, and we're moving on.
From the same part of the world.
That's true.
Yeah.
We are neighbors in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Progressive Ninja Me says you should invite Nate Silver on to correct a record if he has the guts. We actually did. Let's see what he does. So I don't want to prejudge it. Let's go to Twitter. Tim Joy says, is it just me or did anyone else just get the feeling the Democratic field may be about to hit 24? Hashtag Cenk for Prez. Hashtag Cenk 2020. All right, let's keep going. TYT.com/rally, by the way, to find out what I'm going to say in Iowa on June 8th. Trent Sanamuerto writes in, the only reason I know who Nate Silver is because TYT often remarks about how good he is. Every time I've seen you critique his reading of polls, you've been absolutely correct.
Not no mores. Yeah. That's all I have to add to it.
All right, last one, and then we got a lot of stories. Abigail Steam says, I've been watching the show, but haven't been in Twitter in a while. Forgot how fun it is to watch the hashtag TYT live tag while I watch. And that is fun, and those are the tweets I'm reading now. If you wanna tweet during the show and have us read it, a hashtag TYT live. Of course, we can't read all of them, but we do get some and put them on air for you guys, and thank you for being part of the show. All right, what's next, Anna?
Following the most restrictive anti-abortion law signed into Alabama's state, it appears that now other states, including Missouri, are following suit. Missouri has just passed a restrictive anti-abortion piece of legislation in the state Senate. It's now going to go to the state House, and then it appears that the governor in Missouri is likely to sign it. Now, it doesn't outright ban abortion the same way that Alabama's law does, but it includes exceptions for medical emergencies, but not for pregnancies caused by rape or incest. Doctors would face 5 to 15 years in prison for violating the 8-week cutoff. Women who receive abortions wouldn't be prosecuted. So in this case, abortion is banned after 8 weeks, and then the penalties for the doctors who perform abortions after that time are lower than what we've seen in Alabama, where doctors could face 99 years in prison if they perform abortions in the state.
So there's two different issues here. One is it a life? And then the second is it right to force a woman to do something with her body? Okay, first the anti-choice, or you want to give them their own moniker that they prefer pro-life people, although of course it's comical because we're all pro-life. That isn't the issue. Anyway, say that they have that position because at the moment of conception is when life begins. And now there's some logic to that, and so, but then they stop. Their logic, if the right wing ever uses it, usually doesn't go further down the road on any topic, let alone this one. But what they don't talk about is whether, first of all, I don't think they even believe that, and you can see it in this Missouri law. If you really thought it was a life form, well, then you would put the woman in jail. Like, for example, if a woman randomly killed someone, their neighbor, would you say, well, it's a woman or it's a mom, so I don't want to put away the mom? No, you would give her the full force of the law. If a mom killed their 1-year-old baby, would you put her in prison? Yes, of course you would. But you're not putting the women here in prison, thank God, but it's because you don't really believe it's a life form and you don't really believe it's murder. Okay, now, and your followers don't either. All those women who say like, oh yeah, I'm pro-life and they should end abortion, okay? You wanna put the woman in prison? No, no. Why do you go no? It's because you know it's not an independent life form. And so that gets to my second point. Look, even if you think it's a life form at the moment of conception, it is definitely, by definition, not an independent life form. So, okay, if you think it's independent, take it. The women in those cases don't want it in their body. They don't want to carry it for 9 months, so you take it. Now, if it was at the point of viability, then you could take it. And we could say as a society, no, that's an independent life form. The mom and dad don't have to take care of it. Other people can take care of it. We got it from here. And that's the state protecting an independent life form, and that makes sense. But if it's not viable outside of the mom, Then we go to point number 2, and you're saying to a woman, I'm going to take away your liberty, and I'm going to compel you to use your body in a way that you do not agree to. And look, there's a different word for that. Forcing a woman to do something against her will with her body. It's called rape. So that sounds super harsh, and one of the legislators fighting back used similar language, but that is literally what you're doing. And if you say, well, no, but in rape it's sexual and there's penetration. In these bills, there's usually transvaginal ultrasounds, which is also penetration.
And
that's the government doing it. That's the government saying, we are going to do that to you. And in some cases, including this one, even if you've been raped, we're gonna do it again. Then we're going to compel you, not just in one time period, but for 9 months against your will to carry this life form that you do not agree to, okay? And so I think women are within every right to say, you take it. And if you can carry it somewhere else, you do it. But I don't want to, you're taking away my liberty. And that should be the end of the conversation. But no, the right wing persists anyway, and they always twist the debate and do sophistry, and they don't acknowledge that it's not an independent life form, even if you thought it was a life form.
So throughout the week, we have debunked this notion that science indicates that it's life at the moment of conception. We've talked about, the real reasons behind why our lawmakers do this type of stuff and push for this type of stuff. And we've also talked about how disingenuous they are, how hypocritical they are when they talk about the importance of life. Because as we know, there are countless living, breathing human beings here in the United States right now whose lives are not valued. We see it every time there is excessive force used by police and someone who's unarmed gets shot and killed. We see the type of discourse that takes place and the type of rhetoric that's used by the right wing. That rhetoric would indicate that they don't care too much about human lives. We've seen it in the way that they fight to cut certain funding that would help improve the lives of children in America. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so I hate the fact that they get to frame the debate. They get to come out there with all of these nonsense arguments, and then everyone who has common sense is left, trying to fill in the blanks and have a reasonable discussion about what's really happening. The fact of the matter is, what we have in the United States is exactly what the founders of this country and the founders of this country did not want, which is this combination of church and state. We have religious groups in this country, specifically Christians in America, dictating the way women get to live their lives. And we're not supposed to have that. That is supposed to be against our Constitution. But it doesn't matter. I mean, and in the same breath, you'll have the Republican Party pointing their fingers at other countries and talking about how terribly those countries, mostly Muslim majority countries, how terribly they treat their women there. How the men control the women there, how the women don't have freedom there, how they don't have liberty there. Well, you're now advocating for the government to play a role in these discussions between a woman and a doctor. You are dictating what a woman can and can't do with her own body.
So they'll think it's harsh again, but think it through. I
would argue that forcing doctors to ram transvaginal ultrasounds up a woman's uterus is a little more harsh than their pathetic little feelings. Don't care about how harsh they find it. Sorry.
Yes. No, I'm about to get harsher. So look, when you say ISIS and Al Qaeda in Saudi Arabia control their women and they tell them what to do. They don't let them drive. They don't let them go outside without males. It's so terrible how they're trying to control their women. Missouri just said, if someone rapes you, I don't care what you think. The United States government, in the case of that, in the government of Missouri, is going to make you carry your rapist child inside of you. I don't know that Saudi Arabia does anything as bad to women. So that is your Sharia law. We never agreed to it. We're not in a country where we're ruled by your interpretation of your religion. So it's an un-American position. If you want to live in a theocracy, there are other countries like Saudi Arabia that practice it. And so these are guys in the people who agree with the Muslim fundamentalist point of view, the ISIS point of view, are Republicans in Alabama, Missouri, and those places. They are. If you don't like that, okay, then change it. But the reality is you want to control women even more than those fundamentalist Muslims do. And don't tell me that you are for small government or for freedom ever again. Because small government doesn't get inside your uterus. And a small government doesn't tell someone, this is what you're gonna do with your doctor, this is what you're gonna do with your life. I'm now in control of your life, not you. That is not small government, and that is inarguable. So if you ever hear a Republican talking about small government, understand they are full of crap. They don't mean it at all, and they would control your life in a second with their religion if they could. And in this case, they are. And don't talk to me about freedom, because even if you think it's justified, you are definitively taking away women's freedom to make their own choices and to control their body. So don't ever talk to me about freedom if you're a Republican, because you don't believe in it. What you believe in is freedom for me, but not for you. I get to tell you how to live your life. And so often they'll say, liberals want to control how you live. Comical, hilarious, ridiculous, the exact opposite. We want you to get out of our lives. Whereas the Republicans say, I'm gonna tell my religion is gonna tell you what to do about this. Who can you sleep with? Who can you not sleep with? What are you gonna do with you and your doctor and with your body? And can you use contraception? Get out of our lives. You don't believe in freedom at all. And by the way, in the state of Missouri, even before this passed, they had already, in effect, decimated the right to have to make your own choices. They only have one clinic left, abortion clinic left in Missouri, because of the other so-called regulations they had passed. What happened? I thought you were against government regulations. But when it comes to the issue of abortion, endless regulations, ridiculous regulations meant to limit and end abortion. And there's a 72-hour waiting period. So they've, in effect, banned abortion in Missouri if you're poor or middle class. Because who can drive to the other side of the state, stay for 3 days, pay for all of that, including the not only the transportation but the lodging there, and then get an abortion? Rich people can, and that is another Republican rule, saying, hey, I can do it. If I'm rich, I can go to that abortion clinic, no problem. I can go to an abortion clinic outside the state, outside the country. The rich have different rules, and the Republicans love it. And finally, Republican Senator Bob Onder said that this bill was not harsh enough.
Yeah, can I read you his quote? He says, quote, this should be entitled, not the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, but the Missouri Stands for the, but the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, sort of, kind of, only after the minority party and the strongest Planned Parenthood lawyers in the country were done with the bill.
He said that it's a shadow of what it once was. What else did you want to do, Senator Onder?
Just ban it all outright, 100%.
No, I know he wants to ban it, but what other indignities did you want the women of Missouri to suffer? This bill already says if you're raped or you're the victim of incest, that Senator Onder gets to decide your fate, gets to decide your entire life and liberty. You don't get to decide it. But the senator says, not enough, not enough. I want to control every part of your body and every part of your life. At least have the decency to admit that you love big government and you hate freedom.
Before we go to break, I want to let you all know about how important it is to protect yourself from bad stuff going on the internet. And you can do that with a VPN. NordVPN is excellent. It is a high-grade VPN that will protect you and your online activity, and you get a discount. Just go to nordvpn.com and you get a 75% off deal, plus you get your first month for free. So check that out, nordvpn.com/TYT.
Yes, also protect yourself and your life and liberty from Republicans by never voting for them. All right, we'll be right back.